What's new, crew? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm actually just going to bring you guys along and show you guys grocery haul style everything I keep in my pantry, basically to be able to cook a lot of things from scratch, bake a lot of things at home, and all of those things, basically things that I have learned to keep stocked to make sure that I can make my rolls, my pizza doughs, and any kind of cookies. My goal is to keep it full enough with enough variety of things where if I'm scrolling Pinterest, I can look at any kind of cookie recipe I want. I keep mentioning cookies because those are my kids' favorite. Any kind of cake recipe, any kind of cupcakes, muffins, and just be able to go in my pantry and know that I have everything I'm going to need to make those recipes kind of on the fly. I do this because I do grocery shop once a month, though I don't want to run back to the store in the middle of the month just for one or two things. Eliminating going to the stores as much as possible is a way that I help keep myself in my grocery budget, especially as inflation is becoming more and more the thing. It just makes a lot of sense knowing that staying out of the grocery stores as much as possible is what's going to help save you money, because you go in for one thing and you never leave with just one. So we're gonna go ahead and turn the camera around and I'm gonna show you guys basically everything I keep stocked up to be able to make all of my homemade things. This is just an old box that some canning jars came in that I kept because it fits so nicely on the top shelf of my pantry. And usually this is a lot more full. I took some of this stuff out and sprayed out so you could see everything. But typically what I do is keep as much as I can in this box. That way when we're baking, I can just grab this and pull the whole box down, and it will usually have everything I need and more. Obviously, I always keep a lot of food coloring on hand. This is actually mostly used for Play-Doh, but we do use it in frosting. I have a lot because, of course, Easter was just a couple of months ago, well, a couple weeks ago, really. And we used a lot of this for Easter cookies and just making things really fun. So we go through a decent amount of food coloring, so I like to keep that on hand. Honestly, this will probably be enough for me until Christmas time. That's probably when I will buy more. I always keep the little packets of like frosting and sprinkles and stuff that come in boxes and stuff for cupcakes or cakes or cookies, whatever it is, because we'll use them. So I've got some of those in here. I always keep cupcake liners, both big and small, on hand. We make a lot of cupcakes, but usually muffins, chocolate pudding, vanilla pudding, and different kinds of jellos on hand. And then back here, this is the fun part. I usually keep a lot of this down in the basement on our food storage shelf, but I do like to keep some up here because we run through this so quickly and I don't want to have to run up and down the stairs all the time, especially when I'm in the middle of baking. So semi-sweets, more semi-sweets. We've got minis and white chocolate, just a ton of different stuff. This is a pack of Jello from like an Amish store that we bought. Then these are actually just food coloring markers. They look just like this. I bought these from Walmart. I got these for the kids to decorate Easter cookies with. We just made sugar cookies, and then it just works like a marker. You take the cap off and then you just color on the cookie. It works really well, especially if you have little kids like I do. It's just a lot easier. It's mess-free. Typically it's mess-free, but yeah, they worked really, really well. Always have to keep cinnamon on hand. That goes in so many different things. We also throw these in pancakes all the time, so always cinnamon. Of course, you need salt. I go through a lot of salt. I've learned to just buy a couple of these packs at a time from Aldi because I use this in all the breads that I make, all the doughs that I make, pizza dough, yeast rolls, everything takes salt. So I keep a lot of this. Plus, I go through, I think, a fourth of a cup of salt every time I make homemade Play-Doh, and that's a lot at one time to be using, so lots of those. Peanut butter goes in so many things, especially on the recipes that I find on Pinterest. We throw it in cookies. Almost every single cookie recipe that we like calls for peanut butter, so I always have that in the pantry. Baking powder, of course, that's something that typically lives in this box. Usually I also have baking soda that lives in this box. I know I have it, but for the life of me I can't find it, so it must be buried in my pantry somewhere. Of course, regular white sugar, go through so much of that. I also always keep an extra bag of sugar downstairs on my storage shelf because we go through it so quickly. Again, I use sugar when I make mostly like my pizza doughs, or when we're making cookies and things. When I'm making bread, I like to use honey instead. Peppermint extract, I actually only have this because I like to throw this in the Play-Doh, especially around Christmas time. I made a bunch of homemade Play-Doh for London's kindergarten class at Christmas time for the kids to play with, and I put peppermint extract in it, and then I made it red, so it was like peppermint Play-Doh. It was pretty cool. Vanilla extract, that's another thing. I started buying that in bulk at Sam's Club because it's such a good price, but always keep vanilla on hand. Baking cocoa, that's another thing. I like to actually just get mine from Aldi. I don't go through this fast enough to buy it in bulk, so this little one still makes the most sense for me. Crisco, I use this in cookies. I go through most of this during the holidays. I actually I fry a lot of things in Crisco, like our donuts and rye breads and things like that. I use Crisco for, but I actually will just, after I'm done frying, will pour the Crisco back into the can. And this is not one that I've done that with. This is more of like a scoop and bake or like pie crust or something, but I have some of these in my pantry that have fry written on the top of them, and that's what I use to fry all of our stuff in, and then I can use them, you know, over and over and over again, especially when we're making donuts. We do that probably once a month or so. I keep raisins in the house basically only for oatmeal raisin cookies or cinnamon raisin bread that we make. It's so good, but I actually still typically will buy my raisin bread from the Amish because theirs is just so much better than mine. I still have some practicing to do, but that's pretty much what we use the raisins for. I always keep quick oats around. I use this in so many cookie recipes, and I actually just made this new thing today. I found this recipe on Pinterest. I will link it down below, but it's basically a no-bake oatmeal bar. You just heated some things up on the stove, put it in the fridge, and let it set, and they're basically the peanut butter chocolate oatmeal bars. They're so good, so I'll link these. There are just so many different things you can do with oatmeal, so I always keep that on hand. Applesauce, this one I just pulled out of my fridge, but applesauce, when it's not opened, is shelf stable, usually for about a year or two, so I did include this in here. Obviously, once you open it, it's no longer super stable, because it needs to go in the fridge, but I use applesauce. One of our favorite muffins that we make are applesauce muffins. I will link that recipe down below. I also got that from Pinterest, but it's basically just like a cinnamon applesauce muffin, and it is so good. They're so moist because of the applesauce, so we use this a lot when we bake. Coconut flakes, I like to keep this around. We started making like cowboy cookies. Me and my husband are obsessed with those. We have to make those very rarely because when we make them, me and my husband eat them in like 2 days because they're so good. I also threw some of these coconut flakes in that oatmeal bar. That wasn't in the original recipe, but it definitely added a little bit of toastiness to the bars that I think were really, really good. So I like to keep this on. Of course, yeast. I buy this in bulk from Sam's Club. I store my yeast in my fridge. After I've opened it, it holds it best that way. It keeps it fresh. It keeps it alive, basically. My yeast that is not open, I store in the freezer for the same exact reason. It just helps store it longer. Yeast is one of those things that just lasts forever, but it doesn't take up a lot of room in my freezer, so I store it in there, and then I just store it in my fridge once it's open. Nuts are something that you do have to be careful with because nuts do go rancid, so you have to be careful. I don't buy nuts in bulk because I don't go through them fast enough. The only time I ever buy them in bulk is Christmas time because that's when we typically are making so many cookies and trying new recipes and different things. My husband's grandma also showed me how to make these caramel nut rolls that are so good, and that's what I bought these for. So just a little bit left over, but we throw these in cookies every once in a while. Not as much for the kids, but me and my husband like. I did start keeping just a little bag of self-rising flour on hand. I will link a recipe down below. I think I found it on Pinterest. If not, if I can't find the actual recipe link, I'll just type it down below in the description box. But it's basically just I think it takes 15 minutes from start to finish to make these instant little dinner rolls. I've made them a couple times. They're decent. They're not my favorite, but I found some other recipes that I use self-rising flour for. It's basically just so you don't have to use yeast, and it's more of like an instant bread that you can make with self-rising flour. So I kept that on hand because when I was doing my whole self-sufficient journey, I found so many recipes that called for self-rising flour, so I bought a bag. Powdered sugar. This is another thing I buy in bulk from Sam's Club, and then I just store them in these mason jars as needed. We use powdered sugar every time we make cream cheese frosting. That's what we use powdered sugar mostly for, and sometimes when we make puppy chow, but we only do that typically around the holidays, so we don't go through this quite as fast. These are actually just some crushed candy canes that I got, I think 2 Christmases ago. but they're still holding tight. They're obviously nothing but like sugar, so they last forever. But we obviously use these mostly around the Christmas time. We sprinkle these on top of like chocolate dipped pretzels or peanut butter balls and things like that, but the kids like these. I did mention honey earlier, but I do keep honey on hand. I just get this from Aldi. It's pretty cheap and it works really well in my bread recipe. Brown sugar, obviously I get this from Sam's Club. This is another thing I buy in bulk. It's the best price. We use so much brown sugar, especially around the holidays. We put this in our ham recipes. You just always have to keep this on hand because most recipes will call for brown sugar. I would highly recommend keeping some sort of oil on hand, whether it be vegetable oil or olive oil. You can pick your poison when it comes to that. I like these big vegetable oils because they're a pretty great price. It's a gallon, and that usually lasts me a super, super, super long time. I do use pure olive oil in my bread recipes because that's what I prefer. That's what the recipe calls for. And I use pure olive oil in my pizza dough recipe. If you want to know that, I'll link that down below for you guys. I have a video on it. Then of course the last thing, just some all-purpose flour. Obviously you need this for like every recipe on the name of the planet. I keep 40 pounds of all-purpose flour on hand at all times because of that reason. But that's just a really quick overall of everything I keep in my pantry at all times to make as much as I can from scratch. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this was a little helpful for you guys. Maybe gave you a little bit of insight, especially if you are also in the same boat trying to make a lot of things from scratch these days with inflation and just trying to limit the amount of things you're actually buying from the grocery store. Thank you guys so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hang out with me, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.
Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Going for a ride down the side, PCH, country limit. I don't need a guide.